My parents chose to celebrate my daughter Georgina's 15th birthday by throwing us out of the house. As part of their humiliation, they presented her with a velvet box containing a key, allowing her to believe it was for a car, only to crush that hope moments later. Then they informed us we had 24 hours to vacate and move into the damp, decaying shed in the backyard. I didn't raise my voice. I chose to act instead. 7 days later, they were the ones in panic, their voices filled with fear. That morning had seemed ordinary, almost too ordinary. The house was filled with the scent of sugar and coffee, the kind of comforting smell that makes you believe people can still change. My mother quietly hummed as she arranged plates, while my father polished the silverware as if we were a wealthy, prestigious family. For once, there was no shouting, no harsh criticism, no coldness in their tone. Georgina, who had just turned 15 that day, looked radiant. She had styled her own hair in a braid and wore a dress I had found secondhand but carefully pressed until it looked new. She kept glancing at me with excitement, whispering, "Mom, maybe this year they'll actually be kind." I returned her smile, though deep down something felt off. After everything we had endured, I should have known better, but I wanted to believe as well. It was her birthday, and what mother wouldn't want her child to have at least one happy memory? Then I noticed the car, silver, brand new, with a large red bow stretched across its hood like something staged for a commercial. I hadn't seen when it arrived, but it now sat gleaming in the driveway under the sunlight. Georgina gasped in excitement. She turned to me, asking if it might be hers. I didn't know how to answer, yet a small, naive hope stirred within me. In hindsight, it seems foolish. They had never offered anything without expecting something in return. But in that moment, I allowed myself to believe. My brother Ryan arrived around noon with his wife Amanda and their daughter Brianna. They entered with polished smiles and effortless laughter, the kind that fills a room and leaves little space for anyone else. My parents welcomed them with the reverence of royalty. My mother declared that we would begin with presents, insisting that food could wait. Georgina opened a few modest gifts, bracelets, perfume, items clearly chosen by people who didn't truly know her. When she opened my gift, a sketchbook I had saved for overtime, she hugged me tightly, almost to the point of pain. Then my father tapped his glass to gather everyone's attention. He announced that there was one more surprise for the birthday girl. My mother stepped forward holding a small velvet box, her expression glowing with pride, much like the way she once looked at Ryan when he achieved success. She told Georgina that turning 15 meant she was nearly grown and deserved something special. With trembling hands, Georgina lifted the lid to reveal a silver key. Her mouth fell open in disbelief. She looked at me, hope flooding her face. I whispered that it must be what we thought it was. For a brief moment, I believed we had finally been accepted, that kindness had replaced years of rejection. But that hope was short-lived. My mother clapped her hands and announced there was another celebration before anything else. At that moment, the kitchen door opened and my father carried in a large 3-tiered cake decorated with gold frosting. Written across the top were the words, "Congratulations, Brianna." Georgina froze, confused, and asked why her name wasn't on the cake. Amanda smiled proudly and explained that Brianna had passed her driving test earlier that morning. The room erupted in cheers. My mother embraced Brianna. Ryan beamed with pride, and then my mother revealed another key, this one attached to a car fob, announcing that the car outside belonged to Brianna. The reaction was immediate. Cameras flashed, glasses clinked, and Brianna rushed toward the window in excitement. I stood frozen in place as Georgina's grip on the silver key loosened. The smile on her face faded slowly, and it felt as though something inside me was breaking along with it. When I met her eyes, I saw confusion, hurt, and disbelief. I wanted to comfort her, to say something reassuring, but I couldn't speak. Once the noise settled, my mother turned to Georgina, still smiling, and told her not to be shocked. She explained that the key she received was meant for something else, her own personal space, something she would supposedly enjoy. Georgina, her voice trembling, asked what she meant by her own space. My father calmly invited us to follow him. We were led through the kitchen and out the back door into the fading afternoon light. I still remember the air, heavy with the scent of grass, gasoline, and approaching rain. They stopped at the old shed behind the house, the one I had repeatedly asked them to demolish. My father unlocked the door with a loud, rusty creak and pushed it open. A strong odor of mold and damp wood rushed out. My mother gestured proudly and called it our new living space, private, quiet, and perfect for us. Inside, the structure was in disrepair. The walls sagged, the roof leaked, and the floor felt unstable with decay beneath it. A spider crawled across a cracked window pane. Georgina stood silently, taking it all in. Ryan insisted that this was what we had wanted, independence. Amanda added cheerfully that Brianna needed the room inside for her studio, as if that justified everything. At that moment, something shifted within me. The initial shock gave way to a calm, steady clarity, the kind that arrives just before a decisive action. I smiled slowly, quietly, a reaction that unsettled my mother. I thanked them, saying I would remember this day. When she scolded me for my attitude, I simply replied that I wouldn't argue. Instead, I took out my phone and captured a photo of the shed, the key, and their expressions. My father asked what I intended to do with it, and I told him it was for memories. That night, Georgina sat on her bed holding the key, her eyes empty of tears but heavy with disappointment. She asked what we would do next. I gently brushed her hair aside and told her we would pack. She asked if we had anywhere to go. I told her not yet, but we would find a way, as we always had. Looking at her, I felt a quiet strength solidify within me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. But 7 days later, they did. Because you don't give my child a key to a shed and pretend it's love. Many people assume that what happened on Georgina's 15th birthday came out of nowhere, but it didn't. It was simply another moment in a long pattern that began the day I was born. I was always treated as an afterthought. My brother Ryan, 7 years older and the firstborn, was the one they valued, the one they truly wanted. I was the unexpected addition. They reminded me of that often, as if I were an accident rather than a child. Ryan, on the other hand, could do the simplest things and still receive praise for them. If he brought home A, B in math, my mother would immediately blame the teacher. If I earned an A, she would question whether I had cheated. That was the pattern in our household. Praise was reserved for him, while I received silence. By the time I turned 18, I believed I had finally broken free from that dynamic. Then I met a boy who knew exactly what to say. The moment I told him I was pregnant, he disappeared without a trace. When I informed my parents, my father stared at me as though I had disgraced the entire house. My mother simply said, "At least this will teach you responsibility." Ryan's wife, Amanda, had just given birth to a baby girl, Brianna, a beautiful, rosy-cheeked 1-year-old who served as the family's pride and joy. My parents adored her. They organized baby showers, took countless photos, and affectionately called her their little angel. A year later, when my daughter Georgina was born, they looked at her as if she were an unwelcome burden. My mother even remarked, "Babies make everything messy." That was the closest thing to affection she ever offered. They allowed me to remain in the house, their house, because, in their words, a single mother could not manage on her own. In reality, it meant free labor. I was given the smallest room, barely large enough to fit a crib. The ceiling leaked, and the floor sloped unevenly. They described it as temporary, yet it lasted 15 years. Ryan and Amanda lived nearby in a pristine, picture-perfect home, with a lawn so neatly maintained it looked as though it had been ironed. Every Sunday, they visited for dinner, bringing Brianna with them like royalty. My parents would eagerly rush to her side, showering her with attention. "She's so advanced for her age." My mother would coo. "She already said grandma today." Meanwhile, Georgina would trail behind me, quietly holding onto my leg, completely overlooked. I would smile politely, but inside I would think, I wish they would look at her the same way, even once. Money was always tight, so I accepted any work I could find, cleaning jobs, front desk shifts, anything that paid. One day, when the sink broke and the plumber canceled, desperation pushed me to fix it myself using a borrowed wrench and a YouTube tutorial. When the water finally stopped leaking, I laughed out loud. For the first time, I felt capable, like I wasn't useless after all. That experience motivated me to learn more. I enrolled in night classes and eventually earned a certification. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. My parents mocked it. "Ryan's wife owns a boutique," my mother would say. "Our daughter fixes pipes." Yet whenever something broke, a leaking pipe, a flickering light, they were the first to call me. I began taking small repair jobs outside the home, helping neighbors and acquaintances. Nothing extravagant, just enough to slowly build savings. Every dollar went into an envelope taped behind a drawer, my personal freedom fund. One day, I planned to use it for a down payment on a place of our own, somewhere no one could ever lock us out. Throughout all of this, Georgina remained kind and cheerful. She grew up in that cramped room, surrounded by fairy lights, drawings, and secondhand books. At times, I felt guilty that she was content in such a confined space. She would often tell me, "It's okay, Mom. This is home." I would smile in response, but inside I would think, not forever. She adored her grandparents, despite their indifference. Whenever Brianna visited, my mother would light up as though royalty had arrived. She would place cookies into Brianna's hands and gently remind her, "Don't make a mess, sweetheart." Then she would glance at Georgina and add, "Laura, perhaps you should teach your daughter some manners." Same cookies, different treatment, that was the reality we lived with. Brianna always received the best of everything: new clothes, private lessons, extravagant birthday parties that resembled weddings. Georgina received hand-me-down sweaters and a homemade cake I baked after work. Still, she smiled without complaint. At times, her smile affected me more deeply than tears ever could. A few days before her birthday, I noticed a small issue in the house, one of the many minor problems I was constantly fixing. I told myself I would handle it later, once things at work settled down. It seemed insignificant at the time, just another repair waiting its turn. I had no idea how quickly everything else would begin to unravel. When you spend your entire life staying quiet, the first time you say no feels explosive. Mine certainly did. The echo of that moment lingered throughout the house long after the words left my mouth. After the birthday celebration, after the laughter and cake meant for someone else, my parents gave us 24 hours to move into the shed. 24 hours to gather 15 years of swallowed words and silent endurance. I didn't argue. I simply said, "Okay." Then I moved quickly. Georgina followed me into our small room, still holding the useless key they had given her. "Mom," she asked softly, "are we really moving out there?" "No," I replied, opening the closet. "We're moving out completely." "But Grandma said." "Grandma says many things," I interrupted gently. "We're done listening." That was the moment my rebellion truly began, not with shouting or revenge, but with a calm, deliberate decision to leave. Once I made that choice, everything else fell into place. I packed only what mattered: our clothes, important documents, Georgina's sketchbooks, and a photo of her first day at school. Everything else, the furniture, the memories, the humiliation, I left behind. Downstairs, I could hear my parents laughing, glasses clinking together. Ryan and Amanda were still there, celebrating their golden child's new car. The sound made my skin crawl. Georgina sat on the bed, pale and trembling. "Where are we going?" she asked. "I don't know yet," I admitted, "but anywhere is better than here." She nodded, trusting me completely. That kind of trust carries weight. It makes you braver than you feel. I canceled the recurring rent payment labeled Parents, a transfer that had quietly left my account every month for 15 years. The screen asked, "Are you sure you want to cancel this payment?" I whispered, "Yes." It felt like breaking a chain. When we went downstairs with our bags, my parents looked at us in surprise. "You're not serious," my mother said. "I've never been more serious." My father frowned. "You can't just leave. Where will you go?" "That's not your concern. You're overreacting." "No," I replied calmly. I'm reacting exactly as much as necessary. Ryan smirked. Good luck surviving out there, sis. I returned a small smile. Don't worry. I've been surviving in here for years. Then I took Georgina's hand and walked out the front door. The night air hit us like both freedom and cold reality at once. Georgina trembled beside me. Mom, she whispered. What if they're right? What if we can't make it? We will, I said firmly. We always do. We loaded our belongings into my old truck, the same rusted vehicle my father loved to criticize. It started on the third attempt, the engine coughing as if it were trying to come back to life. In that moment, so was I. I didn't yet have a detailed plan, only a direction, forward and away. We kept driving until the fuel warning began to blink, then pulled into a roadside diner. The waitress glanced at Georgina's worn-out face and, without a word, added an extra swirl of whipped cream to her order. That small gesture nearly broke me. While Georgina slowly sipped her cocoa, I began reaching out messages to former coworkers, clients, and a few trusted friends. One reply came almost immediately. You and Georgina can stay here as long as you need. It was from Nora, someone I had worked with for years. Dependable, grounded, and genuinely kind. There, I said. We've got a place to go. Georgina smiled, a real, unguarded smile. Told you we'd figure it out. For the first time in 15 years, silence didn't feel heavy. It felt peaceful. 2 full weeks went by without a single word from my parents. No phone calls, no guilt-driven messages, no carefully crafted lectures about being grateful. Just silence. It felt unfamiliar, almost unsettling, like stepping across a frozen lake, unsure if it would crack under the slightest pressure. We settled into Nora's home, living simply and freely. Georgina began to laugh again, genuine laughter that filled the space around her. I started sleeping through the night. At times, I even stopped carrying the weight of resentment toward them. Then one day, the phone rang. My mother's name appeared on the screen, and for a brief moment, I barely recognized it. I answered before overthinking it. Laura. She snapped immediately, skipping any greeting. What did you do? Excuse me? I replied. Stop pretending, she said sharply. You did something before you left. What was it? I packed up and left, I told her. That's all. Her breathing crackled through the line. You're lying. Then she abruptly ended the call. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Nora raised an eyebrow. Problem? Apparently, I said, I've committed some unforgivable act, but no one will tell me what it is. The next day, the phone rang again. This time it was my father, loud, tense, and angry. What did you tamper with? He demanded. Something's wrong, and we can tell it's you. I didn't touch anything, I replied. You were the last one near everything in that house, he insisted. I was the last person to deal with everything in that house for 15 years, I shot back. Take your pick. He began shouting about accountability. I ended the call. After that, the calls came in waves every few days. Sometimes my mother, sometimes Ryan, sometimes unknown numbers. Each conversation followed the same pattern, accusations and demands. I didn't engage. I simply repeated, I don't live there anymore. By the 3rd week, I stopped answering altogether. Then on a Friday night, the pounding began. It wasn't a gentle knock. It was forceful, fists hitting the door hard enough to shake the frame. Nora looked up from the couch. Are you expecting someone? No, I said, though deep down, I already knew who it was. When I opened the door, my parents stood there on Nora's porch like figures that refused to fade away, exhausted, furious, and completely out of place. My mother started speaking immediately. You have to come home. Now. You need to fix this. Fix what? I asked. You know exactly what, she replied, her voice rising. Don't play ignorant. This is your fault, and you're going to make it right. I leaned casually against the doorframe. I don't fix things for you anymore. My father stepped forward. You're being immature. Whatever you did, undo it. We can't, he began. Can't what? I interrupted. Can't live like this, my mother shouted. You owe us. Behind me, Nora quietly appeared, arms folded. "Everything all right here?" she asked. My parents froze, clearly not expecting another presence. "We're fine," I said. They were just leaving. My mother's gaze shifted toward Georgina, who had stepped into the hallway, partially hidden. "You're teaching her awful habits," she hissed. "Boundaries?" I replied. "Yes. I suppose I am." I stepped back inside and closed the door, softly but decisively. The house fell quiet again, broken only by the sound of rain beginning to fall outside. Georgina stood nearby, small but composed. "What did they want?" she asked. "To make me go back and fix things," I said. "It didn't work." She gave a faint smile, a mix of pride and sadness. "You're not afraid of them anymore," she said. "No," I answered. "Not anymore." Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. I glanced out the window at the dark, heavy sky, and for the first time in years, I didn't worry about what might be falling apart back there. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. They had assumed I would always come running, always patch things up, always be the one holding everything together. But the truth was simple. I was no longer carrying that burden. They would have to face the consequences of pushing away the person who had been keeping everything from collapsing. A few days after their visit to Nora's porch, the quiet returned, but it no longer felt calming. It felt tense, like a storm holding itself in check. At first, I thought they had given up or redirected their attention elsewhere. Then the ripple effects began. A client canceled without explanation. A neighbor who used to greet me stopped acknowledging me altogether. One afternoon, Nora called me from work, her tone sharp with concern. "Laura, have you seen what your mother is posting online?" I hadn't, but I checked. There it was, a Facebook post accusing me of destroying their home out of spite. She had included screenshots, exaggerated claims, and long paragraphs portraying herself as the victim. According to her, I had damaged the plumbing before leaving, causing serious destruction. She framed it as intentional cruelty. Ryan and Amanda had reacted with supportive comments beneath the post, complete with heart emojis. I sat at Nora's kitchen table, scrolling through it all, my hands slightly trembling. Nora watched me quietly. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Sure," I said. I've always wanted to be known for plumbing disasters. The following days were difficult. Relatives began calling, demanding explanations. Someone shared my business page in a community group with a caption asking whether anyone would trust a woman who allegedly sabotaged her parents' home. Within 2 days, nearly half of my upcoming work disappeared. I didn't respond to any of it. Instead, I documented everything, screenshots of posts, comments, and messages. If my parents had taught me anything, it was to keep records when things go wrong. One night, Georgina noticed me scrolling and saw the screen. Her face went pale. "Why are they doing this?" she asked. "Because losing control is harder for them than losing anything else," I said. She looked close to tears. I offered a faint, reassuring smile. "Don't worry. I'll handle this too, just not in the way they expect." 2 days later, I did exactly that. I wrote a single post, calm, factual, without insults or emotion. I included a few photos, the velvet box, the mold-covered shed, and timestamps from the night we were forced out. I ended it with one clear statement. We had left the house 2 weeks before any alleged damage occurred, and we had not returned since. Nothing more. By the next morning, the post had been shared over 1,000 times. By midday, it had reached 2,000. People weren't easily misled, they recognized the pattern. Individuals who cause harm, then shift blame. Public sentiment quickly shifted in my favor. Former clients reached out and rebooked. New opportunities began to appear. A lawyer friend of Nora's assisted me in sending a cease and desist notice for defamation. The posts vanished within a week, and with them went whatever little reputation they had left. Soon after, the phone calls started again. Only this time, they didn't carry anger, they carried desperation. "Laura, you have to help us," they pleaded. "The house, it's getting worse. You owe us. We gave you everything." I didn't argue. I didn't hesitate. "I don't owe you anything," I replied calmly. "You gave me trauma, not a mortgage." And then I ended the call. Later, Nora found me at the sink, my hands trembling slightly. "Are you sure you're okay?" she asked. "I'm fine," I said, though the tightness in my chest told a different story. It's just strange, watching karma do my job for once. Weeks went by, and word began to spread about the state of the house. Black mold had taken hold, floorboards were collapsing, and the stench had grown so unbearable that neighbors started complaining. Insurance refused to cover the damages. Rumor circulated that a contractor had quoted them $120,000 for repairs, more than the house was even worth at that point. They simply couldn't afford it. Eventually, the bank initiated foreclosure proceedings. Ryan stopped showing up altogether. Amanda, meanwhile, filled her social media with inspirational quotes about boundaries, as though she had pioneered the concept herself. Through all of it, I remained silent. I didn't share updates. I didn't celebrate their downfall publicly. But every time I passed a hardware store, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. They had pushed away the one person who might have saved them. The day I came across the auction notice, I had to read it twice. The address listed was my parents' home, the same place I grew up in, the same house I had cleaned, repaired, painted, and held together with sheer determination. Now it was being offered for public sale as is. I sat at Nora's table with a newspaper in front of me and laughed until tears streamed down my face. Georgina rushed in, concerned. "What's so funny?" "Nothing," I said, wiping my eyes. "Everything." I circled the date of the auction. It was held in a municipal hall that smelled of dust and quiet despair. Men in suits stood around, exchanging hushed numbers. When the auctioneer announced the address, my chest tightened. The bidding began high but quickly dropped as the condition of the house became clear. The mold, the rot, and the negative reputation drove people away. Eventually, the room fell silent. I raised my hand. No one outbid me. I purchased the house for only a fraction of its original value, so little, in fact, that it wasn't enough to clear what my parents still owed. Even after losing the property, they remained in debt to the bank. And just like that, it was official. I now own the house that had once controlled my life. A year later, everything looked different. The house that had once been falling apart now stood renewed and shining. I rebuilt it myself, every wall, every corner, piece by piece. What would have cost someone else a fortune cost me only time, effort, and a toolbox. Now it belongs to us, fully paid off and beyond reach. My business has flourished. Once people heard my story, they sought out the woman who rebuilt her life with her own hands. I now have more clients than I can reasonably take on. For the first time, success comes without needing anyone else's approval. Georgina is 16 now. She's confident, happy, and outspoken in a way she never was before. Today is her birthday. This morning, I gave her a velvet box. She opened it, saw the key inside, and laughed. "It's not for a shed, right?" she joked. "No," I told her. "It's for your car, fully paid." Across town, my parents live in a small studio apartment, still struggling under debt tied to a house they no longer own. Ryan and Amanda no longer speak to them. The once proud Golden family has fractured under the weight of their own arrogance. And the car with the red bow, Brianna's, has long since been repossessed. In the end, I acquired the house for far less than it was worth. They lost everything, and from what remained, I built something stronger. So now I ask you, what do you think? Did I go too far, or not far enough? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more.